Did you hear that? New music, a new look, and a new YouTube introduction. We have been really busy working so hard behind the scenes to get episode 200 ready for you. I hope you like the new look. So welcome to the 200th episode. It's taken almost 4 years to get here. I mean, when you average out 52 weeks in a year and we started in 2019, that's a lot of episodes. That's a lot of interviews. It's a lot of topics. The podcast began in December of 2019, and I began this online ministry in 2018 as a once a week blogger. I've grown so much in every way, and the podcast has grown too. We have a fun and packed episode for you today. And this entire week, we are giving away some of my favorite things as a thank you for being here with me. Some of you may have been here since the beginning. I know some of you because you're like personal friends. So thank you for hanging with me and also knowing me like personally, because I think sometimes when you know people personally and then they or on a podcast like this, always giving advice, you're like, oh yeah, I know she's not perfect, but you're here. So thanks for loving me through the good and bad, I guess you could say. So to enter the giveaways, I will have the posts available on my social media feed and stories. So all you're going to do is go there, share it, tag me, and then I will keep track of you. And if you don't tag me, then I won't see it. I know sometimes it'll say somebody shared your stories on like Instagram, or somebody has shared a post of yours, something to that effect. But I don't always get those. And some of my stuff is shared by people that I'll never know. So if you don't tag me, I won't get it. Anyways, it's a great thing. So I'm going to send my subscribers a like graphic in the email that you can use to share. So we're giving away a self-paced logic course from Online Christian Courses, one that myself and Dr. Frank Turk co-wrote, which is launching October 2nd. So you're going to get this class right before it goes brand new. It's self-paced. You could take it at your own pace. And it's 10 weeks of great content on learning how to think. One of my favorite necklaces, actually I have it right here on, if you're watching YouTube, and people ask me about it all the time. Fun fact, my best friend from California got this for me for my birthday this year, and I've been wearing it ever since. So I get lots of people saying, hey, where did you get that necklace? So I got the link from her, and I'm going to be giving that away. A few of my favorite pens, like, yes, I have favorite pens. I'm picky about my pens, and I take different colored pens with me to church with a bag of all my pens in it. And I use the same bag at home when I study. Highlighters, you get that. And a Bible study from Jen Wilkin on my favorite book of the Bible, Genesis. I'm also giving away a free Patreon membership. These are going to be 5 separate giveaways, 1 day per week, Monday through Friday, not one complete bundle. So you have plenty of opportunities to win throughout the week just because it's going to be fun, because you have to do fun stuff when you're celebrating something like 200 episodes. Today, we're going to bring in Albert Leon, my podcast editor, and one of my most featured guests to interview me instead of me interviewing him like I've always done. Like actually, Albert and I usually have conversations. I don't necessarily interview him. He's going to ask me questions. I'm going to answer them. And some of these questions are from you guys, the listeners. And I'm really excited to answer those for you. So let's bring in Albert. Hey, Albert, are you ready to get the 200th episode party started?
I am, Shanda. It's good to see you again. How are you?
Yeah, you've been with me since episode 1.
I was trying to remember of how I forced myself into this, because I think it was my idea.
I guess it was
I
your
think I
idea.
told you, like, I can edit this for you. You don't have to go find someone else.
Yeah, and I
And
think I was relieved.
yeah, and of course, I had never edited a podcast before. So
Yeah, but I always tell people that you're more than my podcast editor. You also listened. You listen to, here's the thing about podcast editors that I found out from some podcast friends of mine. Their editors make them, if they have any mistakes, they make them like do this clap into the microphone. So when the editor listens, they see the spike and know, oh, I have to go cut that out, because they don't want to listen to the entire thing. Whereas you listen to everything and you make your edits, but you also provide feedback to me. I mean, there have been many times when I've gotten a text from you saying, hey, your thought on this episode let me expand on that. Or next time, maybe think of whatever. There's no editors who do that. You care
Yeah.
about my podcast content. You probably care about it as much as I care about it.
Well, and I just feel like it's valuable to you to hear a second opinion from someone else. Like when I've told you in the past, I think you might be losing some audience with the acronyms or the jargon. You're in the apologetics world and you mentioned CIA 5 times, and some people are thinking that's spy agency? What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Hey, but I thought in case there's anyone in your audience who kind of thinking about maybe doing a podcast themselves, that we could kind of let them know what it takes to produce a podcast.
Yeah.
What's the process? And I was thinking back to the very beginning. I don't know that it's changed much since then. It's kind of
No.
been the similar thing.
Yeah. Well, what I did before I even started my podcast was I was blogging in 2018. So it's been 5 years, which is crazy. I left the youth ministry, started blogging, and I blogged for an entire year. And my blog posts were posted every Monday. And then after a year was coming up, I was like, man, I really want to use my voice more than just writing. So I actually bought a course and I watched the lady give you the how to start a podcast basically. And I think I bought it from her for a couple $100, and I researched it. I was like, how many people have podcasts right now? How many podcasts are active? How many people fail at podcasting? What's the average number of podcast episodes that actually go out before people just call it quits? And I learned a lot doing that first. And somebody said, if you cannot be consistent, don't even start it. And because I was already consistent with blogging every Monday, I pride myself on saying, if I commit to doing something, I have to do it because my reputation's at stake. So that's kind of like my own personal motto that Dean and I try to instill in our kids. Like, your name is your reputation. It's really the only valuable thing that you have. Make sure you follow through. And then now I have to give deadlines even with my work, like writing curriculum and stuff. So it's like, once I say the date, it has to go. So I kind of treat everything that way, but I started with treating the podcast that way. Like if it's going to go once a week, so I did my research. I didn't go in cold or blind. I knew that I was going to have to script things. And then Apple iTunes like makes you drop I think it's 3 or 4 episodes right off the bat. Like they want to make sure you're not just a one and done. Like you have to drop several of them. So you have to record ahead of time. So I did that my first month. It was December of 2019. I went live and dropped 3 or 4 at that time. And so then you have to be like, okay, what if I run out of ideas? What if I don't have anything to talk about? Well, I take cultural issues and I tackle them with biblical truth. And the culture, like I said, the culture just keeps on giving. But I script everything out. I see some podcasters, I don't know if they have bullet points. I don't know if they're just off the cuff and really good at that. I am not good off the cuff. Like you want the Shanda that thinks through the topics. You do not want the
Right.
Shanda who just speaks her mind, because that's dangerous anyways. I have to have time to think. And so and I'm also the person, I give my guests questions. I know what I'm going to ask them. And you've been a guest multiple times, Albert. So we always talk about what we're going to discuss and how these questions are going to route those guest conversations.
Yeah, I
But
got a question for you. I got a question
yeah,
for you there. How
yeah,
many of your guests send back the questions and say, "Why don't we change this and add this and do what I
two,
do to you?"
you and
Yeah.
Laura Powell from Women in
Okay.
Apologetics.
There
That's
you
it.
go. That's
Yeah,
good.
I
Yeah.
tell every guest, you can send it back to me if you don't like any of these questions, if you don't like where it's going. I mean, I am here to use you as my expert. And most of them are like, oh, thanks for the questions. Nope. But Laura Powell's like, I don't like this one. Let's reword that one. You're the same. Nope. Don't like the order. I want to reroute it. I like these questions better. So you guys are very proactive as far as how you want the conversation to go. Guest episodes are easier for me. They're probably harder for you to edit because you have 2 voices in there. I used to give you 2 tracks. Now I give you 1 track. But you do a fantastic job. If people actually heard the raw, they would hear me say so many times. It's my filler word. And when I hear it back, sometimes I hate it. I'm like, Shanda, stop it. And then they would hear ums and uhs and uhs and ums. And okay, Albert, rewind it. Albert, go back. Albert, sorry. Or me yelling at my dog because he's walking on
Yeah.
the laminate flooring or whatever. But yeah, scripted episodes, I probably have about 3,000 words in a scripted episode, knowing that it's going to take me about 40 to 45 minutes. And then there are times, obviously, when it's scripted, I still will be like, this isn't in my notes. And you said you can always tell when I veer off my notes because then the ums are really coming.
Exactly. I was just going to make that comment. Like I can tell when you're very scripted and you're just moving through the material, and then when you start ad-libbing, because yeah, that's when I have to clean it up a little more.
Yeah. And so my solo episodes take the most time because I have to do my research and it takes me hours to script. So right now I'm already thinking ahead to my next episode my next solo that I have to script. So it will start a couple of weeks before. And it's just the way that I like to do it because I look at them as like kind of like teaching opportunity. I have
Yeah.
favorites, I have least favorites where I'm like, oh, I don't think this one is going to be that great. I mean, you're always wondering how it's going to go, but that's the gist of it. And when I
Okay.
drop it in Dropbox, then you handle it from there.
I was just going to say, what about the technology now? So I think you're not using the same microphone you were when you started. Did you
Mm-mm.
always use that Yeti from the beginning?
This is my first microphone.
There you go.
I
Yeah.
still have it. I will keep it. It's a
And I
cheap one.
remember I remember very well when you would have the settings wrong and I would hear the echo through the room
Yeah.
rather than a good clean thing because you set it on the wrong setting.
Do you know how
And
many YouTube videos I've watched? Like, you have to be, first of all, technology and me, I hate technology,
I know
loathe
that.
it, despise it, fight with it, cords, everything. I'm like, I hate it. I've upgraded the lighting, and I have to because I create a lot of videos now for the curriculum. But yeah, everything's upgraded. But the technology, all it is technology. Like,
Yeah.
recording the episode is push record your recording, it's done. But there's so much more that goes into it than that, obviously.
Yeah, so you get it scripted, you get it recorded. We share files through Dropbox.
Mhm.
I take it, process for. I want to make sure that the sound level is high.
That's one of the things I tell all my guests to hopefully get their nerves out at the beginning before we even record is that I do have an editor. Don't worry. If you need to restart, go ahead. This is not live. I feel like there's a lot of pressure with a live podcast or video, but it's one of the things I heard about sound quality in my research is that even on YouTube, people want more than they want a great visual, more than they want like, a good quality video. Even if they're watching it, they want good sound. If it's bad sound, people are going to shut it off. So you're right with that. And I can always tell when people's mic, like you're not close enough to your mic, or,
Right.
I'm not, you're more cued into certain sounds, whereas I'm like, I don't know. But I do have an ear for if it just sounds like poop. So I'm like, I'm not going to finish it. And a
Yeah.
lot of people too think with podcasting, like if anybody ever wants to do a podcast, obviously you don't have to have all the things that I have. I've grown from this, from this to this point. I've grown, I guess you could say, because I wasn't always working with online Christian courses. I wasn't a content creator for Cross Examine when I started. None of that. I've actually had to upgrade because I'm working with them. But if you just have, some people record it on their phones, the number one, the key to success in this kind of atmosphere is content and consistency. Like you
Yeah.
have to have good content, you have to have consistency, and with a Christian you have to have character. Like you want to have good character, you want to live your life aligned to the things that you say on your podcast. So I would say with those 3 C's you'll be successful doing it.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So enough about production on the
Yes.
thing. We got some questions that you've asked for from your listeners, and I thought, let me. Well, you asked me to. Let's go through these. Let me give you a few of them. First one on a personal level is, what's your testimony?
Yeah, I like that one. So I was raised in church. I think I've mentioned this a lot of times. I mention it a lot whenever I'm especially going and speaking somewhere. Raised in church, God was everywhere. God was in everything. on our car ride to school, we said the blessing at the table. We prayed all the time as a family. We went to church on Sunday morning, we went to church on Sunday night. I was heavily involved in youth group. And I was actually baptized, I think, at 10. And then one day I was in high school, wasn't at church, wasn't at home, and I was praying a prayer. And I ended the prayer with, I love you, God. Amen. And a question like so clear came back. And I had prayed before. Like there had been many times when I've called out to the Lord, and a question came back to me. And I know it was the Holy Spirit like prompting my heart. Do you really love me, or are you just saying that because you were taught to say that? And I was like, oh my, it was like so sobering. I felt like the whole world froze, like, those movies when everything around you freezes, but the main character knows exactly what's going on and can still move. That was me. And I contemplated, well, do I lie to God and say, well, yeah, God, I love you. We're going to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, all these things. I'm all involved in all of these church activities. Or should I just tell him the truth? Like, I don't love you. And so I decided to be honest with God at 17. And I said, God, I don't love you because I don't know you, but help me to know you for myself, because it brought an awareness of the fact that I did not know who God was. I knew about God. I didn't know him, but it also brought a fear. Like I knew what that meant, being raised in church. If I don't have my own relationship with God, what have I been doing all of these years? And so I learned at that very young age, you can't love what you don't know. And I think it resonates with me so much to love God with all my heart and my mind. Because for one, you can't compartmentalize those things. Jesus is talking to the whole person, heart, mind, and soul. And secondly, being an educator, I love the fact that God is knowable and that we are to study his word to know him. And when we know him, we love him. So that's how I got started on my own journey. And I love that God did it when I wasn't with my mom and dad, when I wasn't at church, I was at school and he got a hold of me. And that's why one of the reasons why I don't worry about my boys as much, even though they're being raised in church and they're studying apologetics, I know God is faithful to speak to the heart and get us to basically be aware of where we are with him. So that's how I got started.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking back on it, because I've heard that testimony several times, and isn't it just amazing how God, with you, waited till you were old enough,
Mm-hmm.
mature enough, that he could confront you the right way to say, "Do you really love me?"
Mm-hmm.
And not in a way to chase you away, but in a way to solidify your faith, in a
Right.
way to make it true. And the thing is, he already knew. God doesn't ask a question he doesn't know the answer to. He
Sure.
was making you realize where you were. And it's just, yeah, God's grace is amazing. How do you have time to pray and do your personal devotions with as busy as you are?
I am busy, but you make time. So, it's not always how I want it to go perfectly. I get up early in the morning and I start off by getting ready like first thing. And I make breakfast for my boys right away. And then I read my Bible or pray first thing. I can't do both because I don't have the time to do it before I take my youngest to school after breakfast. And then I will read my Bible or pray later on in the day. So I actually did it this morning. I prayed and spent time with the Lord that way. I have a prayer journal. I'll write in that because honestly, sometimes I want to tackle a to-do list and I have to stay focused. So I do write in a prayer journal a lot lately. And then tonight I was studying my Bible study around 6:30 after dinner. So I am a wife and a mom. It's going to be in there. And then my secondary thing to that is, how do I stay knowledgeable? Like I'm taking a class right now on the philosophy of C.S. Lewis. How do I read those books? It's a challenge sometimes, but like tonight I read one of the essays. And so I block it off like this night I have to read this essay, et cetera, et cetera. So I can sit here and bore you with all the details, but I do make it a priority. And I always told myself I can't go a day being healthy with life being, normal and good and being on routine, no tragedies, nothing surprising me. I can't go a day without spending time with the Lord, because that means I put other things before him. And I just don't feel like that's the right thing to do when his word is a lamp to our feet, a light to our path, our daily bread, and so on.
And then you have friends who will send you book recommendations or
Oh,
podcast links, and you have to
oh
squeeze
my
those in there too,
gosh.
because they're wondering why you haven't responded back on reading that yet
You
or
know how
listening yet.
many, Albert? Do you know how many? Oh my gosh. I had people oh my gosh. I get emails like, here, anyways, yes. You know what? If you're listening, don't send me a resource. I just can't do it. I have
No,
too
only
many.
I'm allowed to do that. That's
Yes.
send them to me, then I'll
Yes.
filter and
Albert, you
send you
told me
only the
that's
good
good.
ones.
Yes.
Yeah. So another question, it says, it seems like you've reached all of your goals. How did you do it so quickly?
Yeah. I don't really know exactly what I don't really know. Maybe somebody else thought I had goals that I don't really know what that exactly means as far as reaching my goals. Um,
I
and
think they mean you've got a successful podcast. You're now
mm,
connected with the CIA, and you're speaking. I mean, you seem from an outside looking in that you have
yeah,
attained so much, and it
yeah.
seems like it happened so quickly. How did it happen?
I believe that it probably happened, like you said, from the outside. An outsider looking in probably looks like it's happened really fast. But I can tell you that it didn't happen the way I thought it would for the opportunities that I have. And to be completely transparent, I had submitted devotionals to other ministries. And I won't mention what ministries they are, because I'm glad that I did not get accepted into those ministries. Now that I've grown a lot more in what I know in theology and apologetics and things. So I know that looking back, God closed those doors. And being, I think what happened was when I went to the CIA Cross Examined Instructors Academy and just started building relationships with all of the people that I met there, God really began to open the doors, because this is where I'm supposed to be. I think that's why it's happened, quote unquote, so fast. And then I got hired for online Christian courses as a course admin, not even as a writer, but because I applied and I had to submit a Proverbs, part of a Proverbs Bible study off of, it was Frank Turek, part of his teaching. So I had to take that and be like, how would I teach this? And I'm like, you asked the right question for me, people, even though it was on course admin. And I started writing up the lesson for Proverbs. And then they're like, hey, can you write a middle school course if I don't have enough faith to be an atheist? And I was like, yeah, sure. Cause I just studied that book 2 years in a row and I knew the content very well. And I'm a teacher. So it all went hand in hand. And like I said, it's not because it's just God did it, God's timing and the doors that he wanted open. There is no other way for me to say it. I didn't think I would be here. And it didn't happen like I thought it would, in the sense
Right,
of the ministry part of it.
right, and I think again, my observation from the outside is that when your core calling is to be the teacher, you continually look for those opportunities.
You know what question used to annoy me when I used to apply for teaching jobs? Like my 5-year goal, my 10-year goal, how do I continue to be a lifelong learner? And I'm like, people, I just graduated from college. I do not even want to consider the lifelong learner thing. And I was like, how do I lie about this question? Because I'm not gonna be a lifelong learner with, in education. I'm like, what is this? And now I'm like, you guys gotta learn. Like I read all the books and learn all the things. So now I'm all about the lifelong learning, but it used to annoy me. It's just a college student fresh out of college does not want to think about being a lifelong learner.
And yet here you are, you've working with Frank Turek, you partnered with him writing curriculum based on his material. So one of the questions that came in is how did your friendship or partnership with Frank Turek begin?
Yeah, that was because of CIA 2 years ago. Actually, fun fact, Dean found Frank Turek on YouTube in 2020, and he showed me a video of Frank's like, listen to this guy, the way that he talks to people. about, about God. And it was his college, like when people do Q&A on the college campuses and Frank gets to answer the questions. And I was like, man, he doesn't use Bible verses. Like, I don't like that. I didn't like that part that Frank didn't do that, but I didn't understand that Frank was coming from an angle that he was talking to atheists and skeptics. That's what he does. And so it took me a while to warm up to the whole thing. I was like, wait, faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. We need the Bible. And so I was all about Bodie Baucham, listening to him that year, got expository apologetics. So it was just funny how it happened. And then I thought, you know what, I'll get Stealing from God. That was the first book of Frank's that I got. And I read it and didn't understand probably like 3/4 of it or more. I took notes. I always write in my books. I look up words and definitions, but I had never known the apologetics arguments or anything like that. And so it took me a while. And then I was listening to Frank's podcast and he said he taught classes, online Christian courses, and anybody could take them. And I'm like, wait a second, we get to learn this stuff like without having to go back to college? Cause you know me, I'm done with college. So I signed up for How to Interpret Your Bible with Frank. Then I took J. Warner Wallace's Cold Case Christianity through OCC. And then while I'm taking J. Warner Wallace in 2021, they're like, hey, there's this Cross-Examine Instructors Academy. If you're a speaker or you do these things, we can help you get better at what you do. And this is an extensive training. So I applied and I'm like, if you guys don't accept me this year, I'll just keep applying till you do. That's what I put on my application. Well, they accepted me that year. And then I went to Chino Hills, Calvary Chapel. Chino Hills is where they hosted it that year. And then I just went and I presented part of it. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. You have to read several books and everything before you go. And I had met Frank there. Frank is very down to earth and he's very just a people person. Like he's very kind and humble. And so when at CIA, all the instructors sit with you at tables. So they all rotate around. So you get to talk to a whole bunch of them. So they do not isolate themselves. Like they sit with you at the table and you get to talk with them. And I thought that was so cool that they do that, because a lot of times when people have bigger names in, no matter what it is, if it's in the Christian realm or if it's another one, it's almost like they exit through the backstage, and then you don't get to go talk to them and you
Right.
feel like a second rate person. And that's what I liked about Frank's ministry and all the people that are a part of it. Like, it's not just Frank, it's Melissa Doherty. She's one of the people on the Cross-Examine, apologetics team. She's helped me with my video stuff. Like I'll just message her. She's like, Shanda, I want to help you. Any questions, anytime. She'll send me videos on how to cut my, videos for YouTube. Very kind and down to earth. So anyways, then they posted the job for OCC for anybody who went to Cross-Examine Instructors Academy that summer. And so I was like, oh, this is part-time. I can still do my podcasts and my own writing and work for OCC. I've taken so many classes with them, so I might as well apply. And lo and behold, I
And an
applied for that
OCC
Proverbs
and OCC is online Christian courses.
online Christian courses, which is a sister
Right.
company, like with Cross-Examine, like they're related somehow. I don't quote me on how. I just know that Stephanie Turek
Yeah.
and runs OCC, which is Frank's wife, and she's basically my boss. So yeah, that's how I got started with it and applied for the Proverbs. And I love Proverbs, so it worked out perfectly. And I actually, while I was applying, because it took me like 20 hours to apply, I was like, I'm not going to get this job. They're not going to hire me. Like, how many devotionals have I sent into people? How much have I done, like before? I'm not going to get this job. So I almost didn't turn it in. I had gotten like so far, worked my butt off to like do everything I needed to do, made a PowerPoint, made graphics, did all the stuff I didn't even really have to do. But I just wanted to bring the whole kitchen sink in there. And they ended up hiring me. And then, like I said, a couple months in, they're like, hey. And so when Frank started to edit my stuff, Albert,
Yeah.
my Google Drive sends me an email every time somebody's editing something in there. It doesn't matter who it is. So I had to write the lessons, send it to Frank. Frank edits them. Frank makes it looks like red pin logic. I told him like all the red stuff, like he'll be like, change this or do that. And then Stephanie gets it and she edits it. But the first couple of times I didn't think I could handle it. The pressure was, it was wild. Like I was like, I'm not, oh my gosh, like he's reading it. He's got a doctorate. This is Frank Turek who goes and talks to all these people. I don't like, I felt so inadequate, so intimidated, all of the above. But now I've learned after 2 courses in and a lot of editing and a lot of feedback. Now I'm like, when I send something to my family, like, hey, what do you think about this graphic? Be honest. If they say, oh, it looks good, I kind of get mad. I'm like, no, I need your honest feedback. Like, tell me how crappy it is so I can change it, you know? But because I like the constructive criticism because
Yeah.
it makes you better. So I work less directly with Frank unless we're on a project together, like writing the stuff. I work with there's a whole team of people that are on one of our curriculums, like making it look good with the graphics. And I just look at the colors and they're like, what do you think? I'm like, sure. I'm not the color person or a graphics person. I'm a words person. So
Yeah.
yeah.
By the way, have you heard that J. Warner Wallace is putting out a anniversary edition of Cold Case Christianity?
Yeah, I did. He's great at what he does.
Oh
And
yeah.
really, like when I run his courses before, he'll be like, Shanda, be careful how much you take on, invest in your marriage. You make sure that you and your husband are good. Like he cares very much about how much you give to the ministry and why, and taking care of first things first. So I can't say enough about Jim. Jim Wallace is a great guy and gives good advice. He's always checking in whenever I've talked to him, like making sure that things are good and that you're taking care of your family first.
Hey, another question for you that came in. So pre-trib or post-trib? Just kidding. She added, just kidding on that one. Her real question is, what do you jam to when you work out?
Okay, I know who did this. This is Lara. And Lara makes me laugh all the time, all the time. And she sends me, I think I get a reel from her, at least one reel a day. Sometimes there's more. It'll be like zing, zing, zing. It's Lara, right? On my phone. But she used to live in California. She moved over on this side of the country too. I won't say where because she probably doesn't want me exposing her biz on the podcast. But I'm very leery of meeting people. So like they really have to gain my trust for me to start talking. So she makes me laugh. She works out and stuff too, or I know she used to work out a lot. But here is the disappointing thing, Lara, if you're listening, which I know you probably are. I don't jam to anything while I work out. I am very boring and listen to podcasts or lectures because that's the time I can get added information in. So I'm always listening to podcast episodes or catching up on a Zoom lecture or something with this philosophy class because let's face it, I'm only going to do it when I load the dishwasher, and that doesn't give me as much time because when I'm writing and podcast and scripting, I can't listen to anything. So yeah, bummer. Womp womp.
With that, a little more serious note. Now, this came in from one of your listeners. How do you interact with your unsaved family members? Are you bold, more quiet? Do you share a lot about your walk with Christ?
Yeah, I don't go around preaching to anyone. Most of my family, even like the extended family, knows that I'm a Christian, knows I have a podcast. I don't ever tell people I don't bring up my stuff around my family. If they want to listen to me, they know where to find that. You know what I mean? So it's like, why they already know what I do. I'm not going to go tell them or talk to them about stuff. I don't want to hound them. So a couple of my cousins, like they'll come to me and ask me personal questions about things because they know what I do talk about. So then I'll give them advice, but mostly no. I mean, I just feel like we, we are who we are. I'm a Christian around them. I'm careful. I don't say bad words. They know what I'm about. If they want to know more, they'll ask. So I don't bring things up is what I'm trying to say. it comes up, then yeah, I'll talk to them.
What about those who you know are not, who are completely away from the Lord? And is there any way that you try to reach them for the gospel, or do you just leave it? How does that work for you? Not just family, but in your circle.
If you hang around with people long enough and you get into serious conversation, you are going to have conflicting views if you have a different worldview. So my thing is, instead of coming at them with a rebuttal or a defense, I ask them questions and pose a question to them if I feel like what they said something that was against the truth itself, or so even one of my friends today, we were talking and she said somebody had made a statement, and she's like, I really didn't know what to say. I'm like, you ask questions. Like sometimes we think we have to go on the defense for them. We have to tell them why they're wrong. I don't agree with telling people why they're wrong. You have to ask first what they mean, get them to explain it, ask them where they got the information from, like what's your source. Sometimes people don't even know where they've heard it. They're just repeating something. So that's how I do it. I let them explain, because it's their thing to explain. It's on them to do that. They have to. They have the burden of proof if they make a claim, and then ask them where they got the information. And then I like to offer the truth. Have you considered, which by the way are all from Greg Koukl's tactics. He tells Christians how to have these conversations with people, and you don't attack their claim or try to disprove their claim and prove your point. Make them do it, but do it tactfully with questions. He actually is coming out with a sequel to Tactics called Street Smarts, brand new.
Spoken like a true apologist. No, Shanda, spoken like a true Paul. Don't contradict them. Just ask them questions.
Yep.
Another question for you.
Okay.
This listener says, and quotes, I'm impressed that they remember this, right? 65% of Americans claim to be Christian, and only 6% have a biblical worldview. Your message is getting through. I like that.
Yeah.
Why does it matter that they have a biblical worldview? And then the follow-up is, uh, it, I don't know how to articulate it. Is it because bad theology hurts people?
Yeah.
Now, before you dig into the
Mhm.
thing, I want to mention something. So the listener writes in and mentions a biblical worldview and bad theology. So, first of all, do you think that biblical worldview and theology are exactly the same thing?
No, they're not. A worldview is you behave like you believe. So you're living out what you believe. So everyone has one. Everybody has a worldview, and they're formed by the time you're 13. So childhood years, the formative years, they're called the formative years for a reason, because it literally forms your character, but it forms what you believe, and then how you believe you act on. So what Barna is saying, because that statistic comes from his American Worldview Inventory, he's saying 65% of Americans say, I'm a Christian, I have a relationship with God, but only 6% think like a Christian. They think biblically. So that's the problem. So does theology have something to do with it? Yes, because when you look at the Bible, that's theology, right? It's like the study of the Bible. So it's not just, does bad theology hurt people? Well, what happens is, if somebody says I'm a Christian, but they don't think biblically, they don't know what the Bible says, then you have to say there's what's happening from what they claim to what they actually believe and live. That's the problem. A lot of people are saying, I am a Christian, but I don't actually live like one. I don't actually believe like one. That's why there's an issue there. So then if the church is supposed to be the salt and the light, it can't do its job when it doesn't even think like Christ, because it doesn't even know what Christ says. So yeah, we have an issue. When you dive deeper into those statistics, Albert, 90% of America has a syncretized worldview,
Yeah.
meaning everything from a whole bunch of different belief systems. And 75% of those are Christians. So 90% of Americans have a syncretized worldview. 75% of them are Christians. 75% of them don't believe that God is the basis for all truth. These are people that claim to be Christians. If you don't believe that God is the basis of all truth, when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, what do you think that means?
Right.
And then next, 76% believe that you can, as long as you have faith, it doesn't matter what you have faith in.
Wow.
We're talking about people who claim to be Christians. So it's what's the gospel message then? How important is the gospel message to them? I said on on the episode this week, I said this: Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. There's only one way to the Father, that's through me. Anybody who tries to come in any other way, the same as a thief and a robber. Jesus made a very exclusive statement when he said that. He said, there is no other way but me to God. New Age thinks the universe is God. How can that be? It's a contradiction. The universe has a beginning. The Islam says that Allah is God, that Muhammad was the only prophet of God. So they don't even believe in Jesus as the son of God. So how can that be? How can Islam be something you put your faith in and have it be equally valid with Christianity when Jesus made the exclusive statement that he's the only way? This is why a biblical worldview matters, because it starts with Christians being the salt and the light, and the culture doesn't look any different if the majority of the culture says that I'm a Christian. And if they actually thought like Christians and they actually live like Christians, we would not have transgenderism running rampant in our culture right now. There would be no debate such as boys can be girls and girls can be boys. Homosexuality, Christians wouldn't have handed it over in 2013, 2014, saying it's okay, we'll give it to you. You can redefine marriage. God defined marriage. So there's a whole can of worms when you don't have a biblical worldview. It means I can say I'm a Christian, but I can believe in karma. It's a contradiction. And by the way, I think almost 80% of people who claim to be Christian say they believe in karma. So that's
That's
another
synchronistic.
statistic. Syncretistic, yeah. Well, the thing is too, is what we really need to understand is Jesus gave the Great Commission, Matthew 28:19, to everyone. Discipleship is how you get a biblical worldview. Without discipleship, which the church isn't doing a great job at discipleship. So without discipleship, you're not going to get a biblical worldview, because when evangelism kind of became this huge thing, I forget the actual term, but it was like Billy Graham was going and evangelizing, and then you had all these. It was during that early 1900s when these in and out of cities, these tent revival type things took place. A lot of Christians loved those, going to those. People would get saved by the droves. And the problem was the evangelist didn't stay. The evangelist went to the next town over. Who was going to take that new convert and teach them the ways of the Bible? Like Jesus teaches the parable of the sower. He speaks in parables. Then the disciples said, hey, can you tell us what this means when they're by themselves? Jesus says, if you don't understand this, you're not going to understand anything. How can you not get it? What he was saying is, look, you're following me and I'm teaching you, but you guys have to get to the point of understanding. They didn't have a biblical worldview. They
Right.
were still trying to understand. Jesus was taking them by the hand and he was teaching them. And that's what the church must do. We can't be like, oh, share the gospel this Sunday, where they need to continue to walk along discipleship. And that's where the church is falling apart. So because you have a lack of discipleship, you don't have a biblical worldview in the church. We're waning in that department.
By the way, I was only marginally involved, but I knew some of the people who were heavily involved in the Billy Graham crusade when it came through my town. And they recruited churches, they recruited workers, and they wanted to make sure that if people came forward in their big events, that they were connected to a local church for follow-up. You already mentioned that Dean is the one who found Frank Turek and mentioned him to you. A question that came in said, "How did you get into apologetics?" So beyond that issue with Frank, what attracted you and what got you sold solid and so committed to apologetics? What was that process like for you?
It was, like I said, I was kind of like pushing back on it a little bit with Dean. It took me some time. Like he did show me several videos like you got to watch this one too. You got to watch this one. So I owe it to Dean to really continue to be persistent with me, you know. And we
Sounds familiar.
yeah, I know. I'm such a stubborn person. I was like, "Oh my gosh, Lord, like you put great people in my life to really just like get back on track, Shanda." But we put a whiteboard, a big peely one in our garage, and we stuck it to the wall, or stuck it to the door actually. And we would read Stealing from God and we would go through it and by ourselves. I did it and he did it. And Dean would just write like these things on like notes on that whiteboard and stuff. And so I started to really open up to the fact like, oh, okay, like I'm starting to see like these are reasons that we can actually look through science and philosophy and the truth and all these things that point to God's existence. But then Frank had said something that really resonated with me on one of the videos. He was talking about loving God with your mind. And in the church, there's such an emphasis on giving God your heart, loving Him with all your heart, that no one ever really talks about the mind being important. Like
You're
what,
speaking my language as a Bible
yeah,
teacher. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And as soon as he said it, it was like water to a sponge. And I
Mm,
knew like I need that because I didn't emphasize loving God with my mind. Now, again, we don't have to compartmentalize those things, but Christianity is an intellectual faith in the fact that we have a book to God has given us a book, 66 documents written by over 40 different authors, et cetera, right? And he's handed that over to us during this time so we can know him. God does not bypass the mind to get to the heart. And that's one of the reasons why I thought apologetics is my jam. I was raised in church, but it is the final piece to the puzzle that I was missing to bring it all together and make me one, a more articulate Christian to help those who have a hard time with all of the different belief systems that they're being bombarded with, that I need to be able to help them understand. And two, it has made me a better teacher. You know,
mhm.
it's made me a better teacher to say, wait a second, now I know what we're missing as a church because I was in the public school system and had to fill in gaps for my students. If my fifth grader didn't have fourth grade math, I could not teach them fifth grade math. I had to go back and fill in the gaps. Guess what the church is missing? They're missing the gaps of a biblical worldview and to build apologetics concepts on top of that. They will not understand apologetics concepts very easily, and they shouldn't understand them without a biblical foundation. So that's where I feel like I I come in. I love the basics. I love the foundations because everybody needs them. Everybody needs the foundations and set it in simple terms. So
Right.
I
Right.
try to do that. I don't always succeed at simplifying it enough, but that's what I love to do.
So we've talked about the beginning of the podcast and some of the process, but what actually led you to start a podcast rather than something else?
Honestly, just the fact that I knew I was supposed to use my voice. I had spoken, taught in church. You heard me many times, Albert, and taught the youth group and held youth camps and everything else. So when I stepped away and was blogging, I was like, I don't just like writing it down. Like, I want to share it, I want to speak it. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do the podcast. And I did. And that's the rest is history.
Do you have a favorite episode?
Oh, yeah. That's funny. I don't think I have a favorite. There are some that stand out to me. Like somebody's disciple stood out to me because I don't know why. That one was a few years ago. That's it, I guess.
How about a favorite moment from any interview when you're talking with these people, you're engaged in dialogue, anything that comes to mind that some of the really good moments you had with anyone?
Yeah, I like
Present company excluded.
yeah, that guy Albert,
Yeah, forget that.
so I like one of the things about my guests is that I don't care how many followers they have. People will ask me sometimes if I ask bigger name people to come on my podcast, they want to know how many downloads I get, how all that stuff. I don't ever ask anybody to share. No guest has a responsibility to share anything. They just have to have something for my listener. It's always my listener that I take into consideration. So I'll have no big name people on. I'll ask big name people. I've had people turn me down to be on my podcast. But I really like the people that will surprise me. I'll think, oh, I don't know how this one's gonna go. I wonder if the listeners are gonna like it. And then I end up liking it. Like, oh my gosh, that was great. Chris Gonzalez he was on recently from Good Tube Kids. The guy blew me away. I mean, FBI leaving that
I was
job.
gonna say, I think you were impressed that he was in the FBI.
I was just like, can we just linger on this concept for a little bit?
Yeah.
Because people don't realize how hard that is. And I think that, some people don't, some people do. Comfort is a trap. So sometimes you can stay in something because you're like, well, I just don't want the hardship of change. Trust me, I know that after moving. And I
Yeah.
also know that after leaving my teaching job. That's difficult to do as a fifth grade teacher. When you have a good relationship with your students, which I love all my kids, that's a great thing about being a teacher. I don't know what it is, but I've loved every one of my kids and I have had great relationships with them. You are a rock star on the campus of an elementary school when you're a fifth grade teacher and you're coaching volleyball and you're in charge of like the lip sync competitions and stuff. I mean, to leave that is like, is there going to be anything better than teaching kids? And now I get to teach them online, but it's hard to leave those things. So for him to be like, yeah, I was busting down doors and arresting the bad guys, and now he's doing something different, but it's kind of related. That's difficult to do. So he impressed me with what he's doing. And so it's people like him that stand out. It's the people that you expect the bigger name ones to just be like all the pizzazz. It's really not. It's really not. It's the everyday, average, ordinary guest that kills it every time. And I love it because they don't realize. And for me, it's like always, I think it's just a humility and a love for what they do, that it's not a job and it's not this routine thing. It is just their passion. They're doing it for the Lord. And we all just need to stay in that spot, that place of humility. God, I'm just doing this for you. If it's on a little Her Faith Inspires podcast, I'll be happy to do it there too. So I love those kinds of guests.
Let me interject here because for me, as when I in my editor mode, I'm listening to your podcast. Of course, I'm hearing content, but I'm listening to the things I have to edit. It's very clinical in a way. But I very clearly remember your episode with the pregnancy center. But that moved me because I didn't realize how much they were doing to support these women. And then the question was, are you presenting the gospel? And it's like, that's not our main goal. Our
Yeah.
main goal is to be a resource and help them. And from that point down the road, we'll be able to share the gospel. But
Mm-hmm.
right now, we're taking care of moms who are pregnant in their moment of crisis. And it just touched me so much
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
It's
that's one
it's
that
Adrienne Patterson. Yeah. She was on a few months back, maybe 6 months ago or something like that. But honestly, Albert, I'll be honest with you too. When we first started that conversation and I asked her about that, I was like, wait, do I have somebody on here that's like a Christian, pregnancy? She's like, it's not a crisis pregnancy center either. She she told me the word crisis in there. I'm like, wait a second, where is this conversation going to go? And so as she continued to talk, then
Exactly.
I began to warm up to it. But at first I was kind of like how I was with Frank, like, wait a second here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to hear people out too, because Adrienne is doing great work, but the way that she started off explaining it, I was kind of like, oh, where are we going? Like, you know what I
Well,
mean? So
and if you remember, I liked her explanation. It won me over. She goes, pregnancy is not a crisis.
yeah.
Pregnancy is a blessing. It's a great thing. And we don't want to convey this crisis motif with the pregnancy. That's not what we're going to call ourselves. It just
Mhm.
doesn't fit. Okay, another question. What's the hardest part for you about making your podcast?
Lately or recently, it's been getting it out to you in a decent amount of time and feeling, you know, like I don't like to rush the scripting process or anything. And then one of the other challenges is, oh, well, I like to be ahead of my podcast by a few weeks. So that can be a challenge at times if something comes up and I want to hit it like that Saturday. It's like I can't. So sometimes my topic might be delayed, I guess you could say. Like if I'm going to talk about something and the podcast is ahead by 2 weeks, then that whole topic might be like, it may be gone by then, especially if it's a cultural thing. So I could be behind the calendar a little bit. But I also won't talk about stuff that everybody else is talking about just to talk about it. I can't stand that. Like, I'll tell you right now, that's not a challenge for me to not talk about stuff. It's annoying. Like when I see everybody's talking about the same one topic, if I follow these influencers on Instagram, they all want to talk about it. Why? Because everybody's talking about it. It's trending. That's just for likes and clicks and shares. I'm not going to do that unless it suits my, my genre, my target audience, something like that. Unless I feel like it's worth it. It's worth our time as Christians to talk about it. I'm not going to jump on a bandwagon like that. And honestly, I have learned a lesson. Don't jump on a bandwagon. I've done that once and I regretted it. And
Yeah,
actually me and you had to go back and we had to cut something, a book that I recommended and everything out
I
of that.
remember.
Yeah. But I only spoke on it because it was the George Floyd issue back in 2020. Everybody was talking about it. And I should not have done that. It's just that not enough information had come out. Everybody was in a high emotional state of chaos and frustration and everything else. And it was like, think before you speak. So I've learned that lesson. And the only other challenge I have is to make sure I keep my eye on guests. So a lot of my guests are vetted. I get people asking to be on my podcast a lot. Usually they're people with like, I'm a health coach or I'm a Christian life coach or whatever. If I'll go research them, look up their websites, everything, if it doesn't suit my audience, or I feel like it's just, oh, I just want to be on somebody's podcast to get my book out or whatever, it has to provide value for my listener. So that can be a challenge at times.
One last question I have for you, Shanda, and this one is actually from me. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh my gosh, Albert, you
We'll
have
have
a
to
way.
we'll have to end on that one.
Yeah, that's
It's
good.
been a joy to help you with this broadcast. Congratulations on 200. Who would have thought that that would actually would we be here? We like I'm much of a part of
No,
this,
you are. You're part of this team for
but
sure.
but we well certainly we are here because you are determined and you are still able to find content, to find guests, to find topics and bring them to your audience, and obviously they're receiving it well. So um, on your 200th episode, congratulations, and I hope in 5 years there's going to be thousands.
Yeah, we'll see, right? Behind the scenes with Shanda. Three, okay. 2, 1. I'm trying to think of the correct word terminology. Like, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting it at the moment. You know what? I need to sit up. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. I need to make sure I'm in my video good enough. Fix my hair. Oh my gosh. So honestly, these things are, I don't know if they're gonna work for me. I tell myself, yeah, I'm talking to myself. Really, I do. I talk to myself. Um, uh, um, uh, you know, it's the thing. Yeah, you see me trying to I'm trying to get my words out. Okay, I'll restart that. I just don't. I got to get used to it. It's driving me nuts. But um, you know, okay, right, okay, right, okay, right, okay, 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 right, right, right. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna redo that one too. King's James, King's James, King's James, King's James, King's James. Are. Albert, if you're listening, you'll edit this. What you guys don't really realize is that I messed up my words so many times. And thank God I have Albert, because I'll literally in the mic be like, Albert, I just messed that up. Back it up. Back it up, Albert. Sorry. Let me go back, Albert. Oh my gosh, Albert. Dear Lord. Oh, Albert, sorry. Sorry, Albert. I have to cough. Where am I? Hold on, Albert. I have to redo that, but Wesley's calling me. Hold on. Hold on, Albert. I wrote this wrong. Ugh. Okay, Albert, I need to reread the whole thing. Dang, I'm a mess today. Albert, 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 Albert. Thank goodness for Albert. Okay. I'll catch you on the next one, and I'll catch you on the next one, and I will catch you on the next one.
Recording stopped.
Albert is always wise and a little bit of a wise guy, as you can see. I hope you guys enjoyed those bloopers, because I did. They make me laugh. And sometimes they make me laugh when I'm listening, like not when I'm listening to the podcast, but when I actually do them and Albert has to listen back to edit them, I laugh at myself. You got to laugh at yourself or you're just not having fun. So changing gears a little bit, I love getting ratings and reviews, and I read all of them. Some of you have written in on Instagram and had said some nice things to me about the podcast, and I want to read some of those. This one is from my friend Danya, who also took my baseline apologetics class. She said, Shanda has opened my eyes to God's truth in a meology theology world to speak it clearly, boldly, and with God's love and kindness. Thankful for her wisdom. Again, Danya took baseline apologetics, and we got to know each other on the Zoom sessions there as I was able to go through the content with her and the rest of the class that took it with her. So Danya, you know that you and I talk often through Instagram now. You ask me a lot of questions. I don't mind answering those, but I didn't open your eyes. God did by his Holy Spirit. And that's the great thing when God gives us teachers to do that for us. I have those kinds of teachers that I'm so thankful for, but God just uses them to speak the truth in my life. And I'm thankful that I get to be one of those people in yours. So God's the one who leads us into all truth by his Holy Spirit. So thanks for always listening and for encouraging me. Also, Baseline Apologetics is coming out in hard copy form in January 2024. So to go to my website and get on the list, just go to shandafulbright.com/baseline apologetics, and you'll be able to see how to get on the list for when we do the actual pre-launch in December. Nancy W. said, I love the way that Shanda teaches. Her points are so well thought out to glorify Christ. Thanks, Nancy. I appreciate that. And I love teaching, and I hope it shows. Russan said, and I know Russan and I talk often on Instagram as well. She said, it's meant the world to me on my journey of faith. It helped me focus on God's word. Praise God for that. His word is the avenue through which we hear him speak. Nessa said, so encouraging and helpful in my walk with Jesus. Thank you, Nessa. Brett Banford, who was on my podcast sharing his wisdom, he's been on it before, he said this, it means there is someone out there fighting to expose the truth to so many who desperately need it and who can do so in a loving and compassionate way. Shanda reveals that Christianity is not only accessible and true to everyone who truly seeks it, but far more than we could ever hope for and imagine. Thank you, Brett. I really appreciate that. And you are missed around the apologetics world, but your family is the most important mission you have in this life. So I know that you're being used for good things. It's not like, oh, wait, God will use you again. God is using you now. We always have to put our family first. So I cheer you on while you do that. And then Silly HRT, like I think it's Silly Heart, said, I'm learning so much, and so are my kids too. Thank you so much. Such a blessing. It makes me happy to hear that your kids are learning too. Like if your kids can listen to the podcast and learn, or even if you're like breaking down the information for them, then that's awesome. That means that I'm speaking in a way that makes it understandable for everyone. Daniel and Beth said, inspiring, learning new things every time. That's awesome. J and S said, a voice of truth and a cacophony of cultural ideas. Thank you so much. By the way, I like the word cacophony. It's really cool. Thank you all for sending those in to me and for letting me know what the podcast means to you. I'm thankful because little did I know almost 4 years ago that it would have grown this much. If you didn't get a chance to talk about what the podcast has taught you and how it has made you think through some issues, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review. It will really help us get the podcast into the earbuds of others. And side note, I always read the reviews as well. And sometimes I put them into the show so people can hear what you have to say. Lastly, I want to play something Melissa Doherty said about the podcast.
Hey, Shanda, congratulations on your 200th episode. I am so looking forward to seeing where you're going to go in this next year, in the next few years. You and I met through CIA, and you and I are very kindred spirits. Our minds are just on par. You're somebody that I look up to and I learn a lot from. So congratulations. Keep going and keep doing what you're doing.
Melissa is down to earth and a great resource on the new age. If you want to listen to her, just find her at Melissa Doherty. She's on YouTube a lot with great videos. And like I said, she is a friend. And I'm so thankful that she would even take the time to record that and send it as a congratulations for episode 200. So Laura Powell, she's also one of the most featured guests that I've had. This is what she said about the podcast and reaching episode 200. Congratulations on your 200th episode. It's been such a privilege to be on the show to talk about Islam, Afghanistan, and apologetics. Thank you for all you do to bring truth to bear on a wide variety of topics. I love your podcast and I'm thankful for our friendship. Keep up the great work. Laura is great. If you guys aren't in contact with Women in Apologetics, you need to, because she is doing great things over there with them. And I've loved having her. Very smart woman. Also, Wintry Night and Desert Rose, they have their own podcast of their own, and we're on my podcast as well. We love the Shanda Fulbright podcast and the Her Faith Inspires podcast. It's rare that we come across a podcast that addresses so many different topics with such depth and biblical faithfulness. In a time when it's not popular to speak the truth and many Christians avoid controversial topics, Shanda continues to tackle them head on. Here's to 200 more episodes that challenge, equip, and encourage us all to know, believe, and live out the truth. Thank you guys for leaving that word of encouragement and congratulatory message for episode 200. And for you guys, the listeners, thank you for listening and for being here with me to celebrate episode 200. I get messages from many of you telling me that you're praying for me, and those messages are meaningful to me. They encourage me, and I'm thankful for them because I'm a person who needs prayer just like everyone else. And it's so encouraging to know that there's people that I've never met like in person all around the world that just stops to say, hey, I'm thinking about you and praying for you. It means a lot to me. We haven't missed a week and have not repeated an episode. Maybe we will in the future. I don't know, but I love giving you fresh lessons and episodes that I hope will challenge you, help you, and most importantly, lead you closer to Jesus, because it's all about him anyway. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned a little bit more about me and how God has been faithful in my life. I have a fun episode coming up next week and more in the queue. Let me know if you have any questions at hello@shandafulbright.com, and I'll catch you on the next one.